Doing it now? Yes, it is. Good. Marvellous. Okay, so this is probably our first formal meeting of the Chichester Net Zero Community of Practice. And we've had a few meetings before, but I don't think it's quite been labelled as a community of practice meeting. My name is Steve Collins, for those who don't know me. I'm the Net Zero Programme Manager for Diocese of Chichester, Portsmouth and Guildford. And I'm up in Guildford today, and it's really great to have Gareth with us, Gareth Martin, who's helping out in Chichester, and he's going to be interviewing Paul later on. So thank you to both of you. We've also got some folks from Portsmouth with us as well. So lovely to see you. I'll try, if I'm saying anything that isn't relevant to Portsmouth, I'll try and make that clear. Yeah, so today the way we're going to run things is I'll just give a bit of a whistle stop sort of catch up to bringing you up to date on some of the things that the programmes have been doing, particularly in Chichester. Then we're going to dedicate most of the meeting to hearing from Paul. Gareth's going to interview him, and then we're going to have a good chunk of time, hopefully, for questions and answers from Paul, and then we'll just wrap it up at the end in terms of a few sort of pointers to things that are coming up. So yeah, so just to let you know what's been happening, particularly in Chichester over the last few months, we have finally got the parish buying audits lined up for about a dozen parishes. The company has finally been appointed by Parish Buying at the national office, and Mondes, that's the name of the company, will, if they haven't contacted you today, they will be in the next few days, hoping to get one of those, get those audits organised. If you are one of the dozen or so churches who've been offered that audit, you will know if you have. We're hoping that in the new year, we should find out in the next few weeks, that there might be some further free audits from Parish Buying, and that will apply down in Portsmouth as well, we hope, because we've got excellent data down there now from the EFT. So again, look out for emails if you haven't had an audit already, to see whether you're being offered one of those. And generally speaking, I would just sort of say, if you do want to have an energy audit, let us know, and we'll all basically see if you're eligible for one of the free ones, or we can link you up with one of the national accredited auditors. I think across all three dioceses, we're at the moment administering a fund from the national office, which isn't huge, but it's called the Quick Wins Fund. And the various DAC departments are accepting grant applications for that. Very, very quick, easy application process. Catherine in Portsmouth will be able to help you with that. And it's Sophie Allen in Chichester as well. So it's really just for a grant, probably averaging about £3,000 or £4,000 for just some of those things to just get started on your net zero journey. And particularly if you have had an audit, it's being able to address some of the smaller recommendations in the audit report. I think across Chichester in particular, you know, I'm getting out, visiting some parishes, building relationships, which I recognise the DAC teams already have links with you, but it's great to visit John across in Copthorne yesterday, and various other parishes over the last few weeks. We've also updated our environment and net zero web pages, which hopefully now are a little bit more sort of logical and useful. And there's quite a lot of pointers on the web pages to other resources and some of the things that are going on, including funding possibilities such as the quick wins. In Chichester as well, we have finally got news that we've managed to get a couple of parishes into the National Demonstrator Project. And so they are St. Bart's at Brighton and the parish church across at Wadhurst. So that they're going to be sort of getting some assistance to really sort of help them think through some very, very complex problems, and then potentially getting grants for implementing them. And the idea is that these demonstrator projects, we've got 2 of them down in Portsmouth as well, will be great sort of learning hubs for finding out how some complex problems have been assessed and dealt with. And finally, before I hand over, I just would like to have a plug for our Net Zero conference in Portsmouth, at Portsmouth Cathedral, on the 18th of January. For people in Portsmouth, and particularly those as well on the western side of the Diocese of Chichester. We've got 3 bishops speaking there, 1 from each of the 3 dioceses. I'm delighted that Andy Atkins, who is the Chief Executive of Arusha UK, is coming along as well to talk about eco-church and how that is useful in sort of helping people along their net zero and environmental creation care journey. And also, those of you who don't know Portsmouth Cathedral, it's just a real wonderful example of a net zero journey over the last 10 years. They've been picking away at this, and a lot of their lessons are really applicable to smaller parish buildings. So we're going to spend a lot of time sort of going around, having a look at what they've been doing it. So hopefully the day is going to be really inspirational, but super practical as well. And with lots of lessons that if you attend, you can take away to your own parishes. I'll put up the link so that you can book. I'll put it on the chat during the course of the meeting. But now I'd very much like to hand over to Gareth and Paul to lead us through the main section of the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So what we're going to do is Paul's going to do the talking, basically. I'm going to just prompt him really with a few questions, because St. Matthew's in Worthing has been on a journey over the last few years to be more efficient in their energy use, install better heating and lighting, and make it generally more comfortable and welcoming for people there. So, and also reduces greenhouse gas emissions, of course. So, Paul, to start off, it would be great if you could tell us about that journey, starting with, well, how did you get started, basically? Where did you start?
Right, well, I was appointed to the PCC in 2021, and I've got sort of a background of, well, projects and energy, but not necessarily energy efficiency. And my immediate attraction was the south-facing roof of the church, which is at a wonderful angle to install solar panels. And I started to ask questions and try and get the support of the PCC to, there we go, there's the solar panels that we've now installed on that roof. So it was a question of, I was responsible for taking meter readings and dealing with our energy supplier, and I could see our energy bills creeping up from 5,000 a year to 7,000 to 8,000, and that combined with this vision I had for the roof started us looking at energy efficiency and solar panels. So we looked at how we used our electricity, when we used it, how much we used it, what time of the day, and worked out approximately what our usage was. Went to a couple of, well, 2 or 3 suppliers, got some indicative quotes, and realised that it was a doable project. The one sort of big problem we had was that we're in a conservation area, and the conservation officer was very much against putting solar panels on the roof of the church, which is one of the nicest buildings he had in his conservation area. And our first application got turned down. So this meant a project that hopefully was only going to last 1 year to implementation actually took us well over 2 years. So how we got round it was by putting in a full planning application, which is quite expensive, £400 or £500 for the fee, and then asking for our application to be called in by the planning committee, and that enabled Paul Taylor and the vicar and myself to actually make a short presentation to the planning committee. And although the planning officer was totally against the application, all the councillors supported us, and from then on it was straightforward. We got a faculty, and we got grants from Rampion and the Benefact Trust to pay for most of the costs. At the same time, we were in.
Just before we could talk a bit more about the solar panels in a moment. Can I just take you back a little bit, because to the start, and I think that you said you joined the PCC at that time, but I think you also had a very supportive team on the PCC and a very supportive sort of leadership team, including the
Yes, that's true. I mean, we have an environmental committee that I'm a member of, and that's really the sort of steering group that looks towards recycling, what we purchase, fair trade purchases and things like that. But it was really a bigger project to look at energy efficiency, where we could insulate, where we could save on energy, how we could get green energy rather than gas, which was our biggest energy use.
And I think that one of your starting points was to bring in some expertise to do an energy audit, to help you expand that thinking, if you like, and identify what more specifically you could do in your particular circumstance.
Yeah, because I mean, we're only amateurs. Although I've got an engineering background, it's not in this field, and I'm not sure quite how I got introduced to Simon Pannier at BESCO, Brighton and Hove Energy Services Cooperative. I think it was through Rampion when we were talking about funding, and they said you will be more likely to get a grant if you've got an energy audit. So we asked Simon to do an audit, although we were well down the line with identifying the size of solar panel array that we wanted. He was really useful in confirming our thoughts on that. And then he did a major survey of our church hall, which is leading into another project that we're about to embark on. But this audit gave us all these sort of areas that we should be addressing. Not much we could do in the church because it's a 125-year-old building, high vaulted ceiling, and we recently installed new gas boilers. But we had so many sort of areas of other areas where we could look at energy efficiency, which all came out of this audit. So that was really the starting point for our journey proper.
So the energy audit helped you identify some of the simpler measures then, if you like. Heating controls, I think, was one of the things you looked at, and LED lights, some of the less costly and also simpler things that you could do to begin with.
Exactly, and I think we had just changed our lighting. We were aware of that before Simon did the audit, but that was quite expensive. We renewed all our audio visual at the same time. But that's made a huge difference to the church. For those that have seen it, it's now very much a more welcoming space with the lighting we put in, and it's saving us money on our energy costs.
And could you tell us a little bit more about the actual buildings? Because I think you've got a church and a hall and an office. Yeah. So it's a combination of buildings.
We've got a church that I guess capacity of about 200, Victorian church, 1895 or so when it was built. Big high ceiling, as I said, virtually no insulation at all, a tiled roof. And to the right of the picture you're looking at there, about 10 meters away, we've got a large hall, again, vaulted ceiling, no insulation, single brick walls, not double glazed. And that's the basis of a major project that we want to put in, insulated ceiling, LED lighting, double glazing or secondary glazing, and to replace gas heaters with a heat pump.
And that's your next step then, is to you know, the next stage in your process, is it?
Well, yes, the next day we put a heat pump in the church office, which is part of the church hall. But that was a recent addition to the church hall. The church hall again is over 100 years old, but the office extension was about 20 years ago, and that had underfloor heating. So we were able to take out a gas boiler and put in a 5 kilowatt air source heat pump, and that heats the underfloor heating. This is the first winter that it's been in operation, so we're hoping that'll be successful and no complaints from the office.
Yeah.
And we went to another interesting company, a greener alternative, based in Shoreham, who have been really helpful to us, and we're hoping we'll use them on the main hall project, which is a much bigger heat pump that's getting on for 30 kilowatts as opposed to 5 for just for the church office and a meeting room.
So on the heating, in effect, you've got three separate systems then. You've got the church, the main church building, the office area and meeting room, and the main church hall. So you're able to pick them off separately.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you're doing that in stages, and it'd be interesting to see how you get on with the heat pump in the office area, because that was fairly straightforward to change, was it? Because you already had underfloor heating. It was just swapping the gas boiler for the heat pump.
Exactly, and we got a government grant for that they give for replacing gas boilers. So the grant was 7,500, and the heat pump was 10,000. So it was a very doable project.
Okay.
And the heat pump just went outside the wall. The gas boiler was on the inside, so we just stripped that out and put the heat pump on the outside wall. So very straightforward, and no planning permission needed for that. But if we do need to put a heat pump in for the main hall, then we need planning permission, because more than one heat pump requires you to have planning permission. I think it's crazy, but you know, those are the rules.
Go back to the solar panels then, because that's like a major project that you had. So how much power do those solar panels generate? How does it power all the church buildings, or?
Yes, it's we were going to put 20 panels, but in the 2 years it took us to get the project to fruition, solar panel technology had improved, and the dimensions of the panels from when we first started, they were slightly larger, and we ended up with 2 meter by 1 meter panel. We were going to put 20 in, but because of shading issues and the space on the roof, we ended up with 17. But because the technology was so much better, we virtually got the same 8 kilowatt output that we'd first envisaged. So half of the output goes to the church, and that runs lighting, audio visual. We've got a little kitchen area, so it sort of supplies that, and we're energy efficient there. And in the hall, the electricity usage is mainly for lighting, office equipment, computers, printers, lighting again. So 4 kilowatts for the hall and the office. And again, on a sunny day, we are self-sufficient. We did think about putting batteries in, battery storage, but when we looked at our usage, most of it is during the daytime. So storing it would be quite an expensive option. And we get our gas and electricity from Octopus, and Octopus have a feed-in export rate of 15 pence a kilowatt. At the moment, because we're on a 3-year fixed contract, we're only paying 19p a kilowatt. So, you know, 4p difference, it wasn't worth the capital expenditure of putting in a battery. So any electricity we generate that we don't use, we export, and we get 15p for it. So at the end of the first year, we've actually gained £1,000 in terms of electricity we've generated and used ourselves, and electricity we've exported.
Are you able to share with us the cost of that, of the solar panels project?
The project was £12,000, including 1,000 for scaffolding for access. So, you know, this is on 2022 energy rates because we're just coming to the end of a 3-year contract. So as energy costs go up, I think we're looking at a 7 or 8 year payback. So it really is a very doable project financially.
And it was interesting what you said earlier about your planning issues, because I think this is a topic that's likely to come up in other locations as well, actually. But you know, and you initially had a problem, but then you worked directly with the councillors, in effect, to overcome that problem.
Yes, I mean the councillors were very supportive, and you know, Worthing as a town, like the Church of England, has got this commitment to be net carbon zero. So the only way the councillors were arguing the only way they were going to do that is by putting projects like solar panels and heat pumps, getting people to insulate their homes better is the only way it's going to be achieved. And having conservation officers that just doing their jobs but are very nitpicking is not the way it's going to be achieved. I realise for a listed church, it's going to be very much more difficult, and unless you can hide the panels or put them on another building, it is going to be very hard to achieve that. But I do think the present government is going to ease the conditions for these projects of this type.
And did you insist then that it went to a full planning committee meeting rather than it being just administered by the officials? You were able to do that, were you?
Yeah, we were advised by one of the councillors. They said it's much better if you can make your own case, make the stress the importance of all the community work that you do, that it's not just for the benefit of the church and the congregation, but for the benefit of the parish community around us. And we had a whole list of users that we have in our church hall, a whole variety of community groups, and it just made the case for us, really.
Can you say a little bit more about the funding you received, the grants, and how easy that was? I know that you're doing that for your new project as well. So what's your overall experience in applying for grants?
Well, we've been very grateful for Rampion, the wind farm offshore, which I can see from where I am now. I mean, they have this community fund. I'm not sure how much it is a year now, but I think it's well over $1 million. And they support a whole range of community projects. And one particular area is this in the net zero and energy efficiency. And the officer, one of the grants officers, actually came to the church. We talked him through what we wanted to do, and was very helpful in guiding us. A very simple application application form. They decide within a couple of months. You have to be in an area, I think, between Beachy Head and I think it's Littlehampton. I think it goes inland as far as Horsham. That's the sort of eligible area.
Paul, I've got the map. I'll try and find it, but if I can't find it, I'll share it with people afterwards.
Yes.
Yeah, that's useful to know. Actually, I didn't realise it went inland that far. Actually, and it's still active, that Rampion fund.
Yes. Okay. In fact, when we had the solar panels and had those installed, the officer came to have a look at it, and then started talking to us about other projects. And I mentioned the hall, and he said, "Oh, the insulation suspended ceiling, that would be very keen to support that." So we applied earlier this year for a grant to help us towards the ceiling, and we got about 70% of what we asked for the ceiling, and that's the project we're going to do next with the help of a net zero quick win, which is nearly paying the cost of putting in a ceiling with insulation above and LED lighting.
Okay, good. Well, I think we need some space in a few minutes actually for questions, because I expect there'll be some questions about your interesting experience. But just to say that those of you who have signed up to be on the Community of Practice SharePoint, there is going to be a series of case studies on there. One of them is Paul's case study at St Matthew's in Worthing. So if you want to be part of that, if you want to access that information basically on the SharePoint drive, if you fill in the form that you should have had in one of the emails I sent round. And also, Paul, you're willing to talk to people individually about your experience, I think. Is that right?
Yes, in fact, I've had half a dozen churches in the Worthing area have come to see us, and I've also visited other churches to have a chat and talk people through mainly the solar panels. But you know, as we've progressed with the whole project, I'm sure there'll be a lot of other things that we're happy to share. And you know, if you and Steve want to share my contact details, happy to have individual discussions with people, or you know, we're very welcome to visit us in Worthing.
Okay, that's good. So if you're happy, then we can send your email to the whole group.
Sure.
If that's okay. That's
Yep.
great. Thanks. That'd be really useful, actually. Okay. Well, I think what we'll do, shall
I'll
we
just
see
put up
this?
I'll just put up the catchment area just now, actually. So hopefully you'll be able to see this, because it does go quite a long way inland. Are you? Yes, should be able to see it now.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So I think it covers that substation, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good.
Great. Stop showing that now.
Yeah. So probably be useful to have a look at. Do they have a website with that information? Presumably.
Yes, I actually just got it from there because my other link had
Yeah.
broken. So if you just search, I just literally searched Rampion Community Fund catchment area, and
Okay.
yeah, you get the whole site there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right.
I think they have another funding window, from what I've heard from the church buildings team in Chichester, that's closing sometime around sort of late March, April. So yeah, good to bear that in mind.
And there's also the Sussex Community Fund, which is run by the same team.
Yeah.
We have also had grants in the past for things in the church. We wanted to put some comfortable seating in. We got help with that. So they help in a whole range of things. And we're a warm, welcoming space in the church. And they gave us help towards heating costs. So there's a wide range of help out there for all of us, really. But we're not sort of not allowed to apply because we're a religious institution. They're very, very helpful as long as we do things for the community.
Okay. Right. So shall we open it up for some questions and
Do you mind if I just chip in first?
Okay, it's gone, Simon.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
So I think Rampion is currently, I heard they're not accepting applications at the moment, but I suspect that's just because they're full. I think it will still be there. And as you say, Paul, there are other community funds out there, and I'm sure Rampion will stay because they're looking to expand. I'm sure that will be the case. Can I, a couple of things you said, Paul. You should really have got planning.
Do you want to say
you should really have got planning permission for your first heat pump.
No, I actually asked the question and was told for the first heat pump. I've got that in writing.
Wow. So I would caution people, ask the question by all means, and it's absolutely the case. If it was a house, it would be permitted development. But we got into a bit of trouble for doing a heat pump at a school because we'd made the same assumption.
No.
So check with your local planning authority on that one. But you're absolutely right on the second one.
Yeah.
Every time you do another one.
And Simon, I don't know whether you mentioned that you're from Besco.
I'm from Besco, yes.
Yeah, did the energy audit with.
Yeah, so I did the audit at St Matthews. Actually, the solar panels were already in place there, Paul. You'd gone through all that pain before I got there.
Yeah.
St Matthews were doing some great stuff already. They had one thing that really impressed me was something we always recommend and very few people do, which was quite simple timers on hot water heaters so that they can't be left on, and infrared heaters in bathrooms so that you have to turn them on and they will only stay on for 15 minutes or an hour, depending on what the time it is, and then they'll go off. That's brilliant. You're already doing a lot of good stuff at St Matthews before we came
we've
along.
Actually put movement sensors in so that they can't be sort of turned on manually. It's just they come on for a short period, 10 minutes or 5 minutes or so when someone is in the using the facility. Yeah.
And the solar, I just wanted to say, you installed at quite an expensive time, Paul. It should cost a bit less now.
Yeah.
You more or less hit the peak, I think. The downside is that you won't get as much for export now. So Octopus, they're currently not accepting business customers, which you would be for export payment. It went from 15 to 8 for a month or so, and then it's currently 3 or something. It's very, very low, but hopefully that will come back up again. And one thing which is a bit of a nuance, so you did the right thing. You split your system between the church and the hall because each of those has their own electricity meter. If you were doing it now, Octopus could offer to share between the 2 meters virtually. So you could have installed a single system at the church and then use a thing they call it electric match, which is really, it's great for anybody who's got more than 1 meter where it's the same bill payer at both meters. If you generate at one of those meters, you can share it with the other one with no cost. So you're using the existing wires to feed it in, and they'll just monitor. You need half-hourly meters for both, but they will monitor each half hour how much is excess at 1 meter and take that off your bill at the other one. Which is great.
That would have been useful. Yeah,
it's really new. It's only been out for about 6 weeks, so but it's good for other sites that might be in a similar position. I'll shut up now, but if anybody's got any other questions.
Well, that illustrates how things change all the time, don't they, really? So it can be tricky to keep on top of it. Okay, do we have any other questions that anybody's got?
Well, I'd perhaps like to jump in at some point because
Go on, Paul.
Our experience has been anything but good. We applied for a big solar array, 56 elements, last year using the prior approval process with Mid Sussex District Council, and we thought it was so easy until they suddenly introduced a rabbit out of the hat, which said, well, we consider your church, although it's not listed, to be a non-designated heritage asset and therefore has to comply with the requirements of the NPPF, specifically the latest version, I think it's paragraph 209 in section 16, which says that any work which you do to the historic environment has to be dealt with by with due care and consideration, etc., etc. So having had our knuckles wrapped, we then went for a pre-application meeting last December, I think it was, and we had the planning officer and the conservation officer down. I had a lot of conversations with Paul over this because I was really upset that it had been rejected, and we put in a full planning application in July this year, which, believe it or not, has been similarly rejected. And the reason it's been rejected is that the conservation officer has trotted out the same irrelevant comments, but in particular, we had set up with the local parish council representatives on the district council to seek that the project should be called in, and they would have been doing that with 14 days notice. They complained that they had been unable to do so, as a result of which the application was dealt with by so-called delegation, with an exact repeat of what happened last year. And I am really, really, really upset about this, because we had no less than 60 positive comments on the website, on the application. No less than 400 people were emailed by the Copthorne Village Association. 50 people were written to directly by Mid Sussex because they were neighbours. Not one person has objected in any way, shape or form. It is truly unbelievable. So right now, I'm left with the only option, which is to raise a formal appeal. which I've actually just started. So I'm a very upset bunny here. And quite in parallel, we're working with a project to look at underfloor heating, reordering the church, air source heat pump, the lot. Had a wonderful meeting with Steve earlier this week. And one of the quick wins, which I think we just might be able to go for, is possibly replacing our gas boiler, which is used in the office and vestry, with an air source heat pump. Don't know if you've thought about that, Steve, but it suddenly occurred to me today. And
yeah, have a look at the guidelines that I sent. Yeah, and
I will.
The quick wins. Just I don't want to go into too much detail of this, but basically the National Office require us to keep the initial sort of conversations separate from the decision making process. So in terms of the initial conversations, I probably need to back out of those a little bit now and have those with Sophie, and then it comes to a panel which I'm on, and but at Archdeacons and DAC as well, and it's a similar sort of setup in Portsmouth as well. But yeah, worth exploring.
Our first step would be to get a quote
for quick wins in Coxthorne. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We just need to get a quote for a heat pump then, really, to get it
Yeah.
started.
Mm-hmm. John, can I just pick up on one thing that I think you said to me when we met earlier this week? You said that Mid Sussex were one of the few councils that hadn't declared a climate emergency.
That was correct, yes.
Is it still correct?
I've no reason to suppose otherwise.
I just wonder, I mean, I don't know, but it'd be just interesting to sort of see if that had any impact on this or other planning decisions. Karen, are you in Mid Sussex as well?
No, I'm West Sussex, but I can ask South East Climate Alliance. They'll know because they've been looking at all the council's policies.
It's just again, is there something we can do in the way of advocacy and lobbying? Mobilising people through your networks and archdeaconries as well. But just
I think it would be good to raise this with your MP as well. It just sounds ridiculous. I'm so sorry.
It does, doesn't it, Paul?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But don't forget, with this heat pump you talked about, get the government grant, the 7,500.
Can you get that as a commercial entity?
Yes,
as it were?
As a charity. Yes, yeah.
Anyone can get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except as long as you're not a council or social housing.
Right.
And John, that makes because I think we're with the quick wins, it isn't a big fund. So if we sort of go up to the maximum amount, we swallow up the fund very quickly. But as soon as you put a grant into the mix as well, quick wins, it brings the amount you're asking of quick wins down and makes it a lot more effective. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I've no idea how much a small heat pump is going to cost, but the figure of about 10 grand comes to mind.
10 to 12, Simon, is that about right? 5 kilowatt? Yeah.
Yeah.
Should be that sort of amount, yeah.
Your setup there, John, is a little bit smaller than Paul's at St Matthew's, but again, it doesn't necessarily mean that the price is going to be much cheaper.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments for Paul?
Can I? Oh, sorry, no, I'm going to let somebody else go.
Sorry, could I ask you, Paul, how you mentioned your building was about 125 years old, and what is the state of the roof? Did you have to check out the state of the roof before you put the panels in place?
No, the roof is probably over-engineered structurally. The panels weigh about 20 kilos each. I think that's right, Simon, something about that order.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a builder in the congregation who took a quick look and thought there was no problem structurally. And the panels themselves, there is two rails that run beneath the panels, one at the top, one at the bottom, and they're fixed to the rafters. So you actually only need to take off the tiles above the rafter to fit on these fixing hooks with the rails go to those. So it's a very straightforward installation. It was done in a day and a half. So, you know, I would guess most church roofs are able to take the weight of panels such as those.
Presumably the installer also looked at these sorts of issues. If you have a reputable installer, they would also look at these issues, would they, in terms of the roof capacity to hold the sort of weight?
The installers will tend to say subject to structural survey.
Yeah.
And if you do want a structural survey, it's kind of £450 to £500 in the Brighton area anyway to have somebody come and do a structural survey.
Yes, our predicament is that, you know, we've got a 1,000-year-old building where the Victorians obviously re-roofed it, but it hasn't been touched since the Victorians re-roofed it. And applying solar panels into a space which is actually a hidden space, so we could get away with it, but it would need a careful look at the state of the towers and things like that, which is rather moved against us. But we're in the process at the moment of, we've got a church extension which was put on in 2006 with underfloor heating. The existing oil-fired boiler has just packed in, and we're in the process of installing we're applying for planning permission to install an air source heat pump, and Ohm Energy are doing that, are the company which have given us the best quote, and we looked at a greener alternative as well. But Steve, this may be one for you, and it is so frustrating. What we found is that you know, will we need planning permission? Won't we need planning permission? You know, do we involve our church architect? Don't we involve our church architect? And quite honestly, he comes in at £102 an hour, and it is absolute. And you know, all we could do was to sort of hand this process over to him, and he is applying for planning permission on our behalf at the moment, and it's you know, it's going to add £2,000 to our bill. So if there's anything that the diocese could do to you know, there are loads of churches out there with the same predicament as us. We want to save money. We've been pouring money into energy in an old building which is totally unsuitable to insulate and that sort of thing, and we are, you know, we just we keep coming up against this sort of, you know, can we, can't we, will we, won't we, and all that sort of thing. I wish there was a process, a simple process where you could say, look, you've got a 1,000-year-old church, you will need this kind of planning permission, you'll need to go through these steps. When do you involve historic churches trust and all this sort of thing? It is so frustrating, and I've been banging my head against a wall for about 8 years on this process. And it's just, you know, we've just about now going to have an air source heat pump, and you know, let alone having to address a problem with a heating system in our main church, which was installed in 1953. It's an old, you know, heat exchange burner which blasts this flame into the church, and all of it consumes a huge amount of oil every year. I mean, it's just so.
Andrew, is your church listed? I am familiar with the church.
Grade 2 listed church.
Yeah, okay.
2-star.
No, Andrew, I'm hearing that. So it's sort of almost trying to work out how we can get some good quality, best, you know, generic guidance which stretches across planning authorities, in almost like a flow chart on what you have to do and what you don't have to do, and that it's actually, you know, it's not my opinion or your opinion, it's actually backed up. But because one of the frustrating things at the moment is that quick wins, and even, you know, the VCSE funding that Paul was going for and various others, does not cover you know, that sort of consultancy advice. So, you know, there could be a gap that we could fill, which would, reach across multiple parishes with just sort of one piece of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are we doing for time, Steve?
Yeah, we're okay. Can I come in with a question here? Just in terms of to bring Paul and probably Simon in on this, because the energy audits that parish buying does, and that sort of standard model of energy audit, they've got some good folks doing them. They give you sort of generic, informed costs, but not really detailed costing and the really detailed specs. So, Paul, I'm just sort of trying to figure out what it was that you got from Besco, and what it allowed you to do. Were there specs in there? Did it avoid you then having to sort of get somebody back in to write up specs before you started going for grants? Yeah. And so what was in the stuff that Besco gave you? And I don't know if you want to talk about costs, but if you do, that'd be quite helpful.
Yeah. It was quite a high level report.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, about 5 or 6 pages. It listed all the main areas that we could look at.
Mm-hmm.
It listed estimate of the costs, what the saving would be in terms of energy, what the savings would be in terms of carbon emissions.
Mm-hmm.
It was so useful as a guideline, but it certainly didn't go into any detail about
Mm-hmm.
where we could source the equipment that was needed.
Mm-hmm.
But compared with the independent energy audit we got from the VCSE scheme,
Mm-hmm.
it was so much better in terms
Yeah.
of information. The guy from the VCSE scheme doing the audit took a few photographs.
Yeah.
I don't think he did anything else. He was in and out in about half an hour. And the whole basis for our grant is based on his report.
Yeah, we found that. Yeah. And okay, the VCSE one was free, but it then means you've got to do quite a lot of extra work to really put in a sound grant application. Mm-hmm.
And I think the Besco, Simon, it was about £2,000 you charged us. I think it was that sort of order.
Yeah, it was something like that. And
again,
am I right in thinking that Rampion actually paid that for you?
Rampion actually said if we had it, they would contribute towards it. So we put that on with our grant application, and they, as I say, they covered most of it. Yes.
And was that retrospective? Or
not from the installation? No.
No, I mean from the grant. So
the audit. Yes.
Had you already paid for the audit?
No. That was part of the grant, and we decided to have it then. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because they said the grant would be the likelihood of success would be much greater if we'd had this audit.
You got that in place. Yeah. That's helpful. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from people? Can't see it. Oh, yeah, Phil.
Yeah, sorry, I'm late. Had a traffic problem. Absolutely fascinating. Last year we did a project replacing our tower, and as part of the grant application process, the diocese gave us a list of grant authorities at various levels and various application times, which proved really, really helpful in targeting what who we could apply to, and were reasonably successful in that. Steve, do you have a list of grants that, if we were pursuing a project, because we're at the audit stage, and then we're going to go on and decide what we do we have a list of grants that we could apply for?
Yeah, we the church buildings team have something, and I've just finished working with a fundraising consultant who's actually put together a fundraising toolkit, which has an appendix with all the grant bodies that she found on. That hopefully should be going up on the website in the next week. I just want Emma and her team to sort of check it first, to check that they're happy with it, because it needs to sort of dovetail with what they're doing. But yeah, absolutely, we'll get that up pretty sharpish. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
And I think the thing to bear in mind is it goes out of date as well. So we'll just have to keep watching it. But again, if anybody hears of something, if you have a look at the list that we put up, it isn't on there, let us know, because things are sort of coming out all the time.
A question for Paul. You're in an urban setting. Has there been any issue with noise from air source heat pumps?
No, in fact, it's very quiet. I would say it's slightly more noisier than a fridge freezer, but you know, if you stand a few meters away, you can hardly hear it.
Yeah, to baffle it.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, Paul. Have you had to baffle it at all?
No, no.
One of the heat pump people that I talked to said, be very careful to make sure that you've got some fencing around it to stop small boys sticking a stick into the fan.
It's not easily accessible where it is, but that is a point. The grill is quite accessible for small children. Yeah.
Well, take care.
Yeah, there's been real advancements literally just over the last year on noise. And again, I'm sure Simon could speak into this, but up in Guildford, we've got a big project with our schools, and we're putting large heat pumps in there. And we've had some delays, and those delays have really worked in our favour in some ways, because the newest generation of Wiesmann heat pumps has come online, and as well as being very much more efficient, they're a lot quieter as well. So in terms of all the fencing we had to put around them, and the noise issues and how all of that affected planning, it's just been so much easier.
Right. Just one point about
I would say
heat
try and
pumps.
avoid fencing if you can.
Just
because you don't want to affect the airflow, but cages are widely available to keep hands at bay.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have to do the baffling for noise now, and so we can have the open sort of cages that you're talking about. Yeah.
Just one point about completely, well, it's not a separate subject, it's very much close to my heart. I mean, we're looking at reordering the church, and that is underfloor heating, removal of pews, air source heat pump. And I've been talking with various suppliers. The one which I've been talking to most is Jupiter underfloor heating, which appears to me to be the preeminent supplier of underfloor heating to historic buildings. And they are telling me that they would want to install heat pumps which could supply 130 watts per square meter. Fine. So you can do the sums and say, well, I've got so many square meters, 130 watts per square meter means I need so many kilowatts of heat source pump. And the question that I haven't had the answer to is, to what extent are the heat pumps being worked flat out? So, I mean, what is the average energy consumption likely to be? It's an open question, because if I look at the 200 or so square meters that we would be wanting to heat, that's about 30 kilowatts, something like that. And that's a very big heat pump and requires a three-phase supply, which we've got. But I'd like to think that the 130 watts per square meter is only going to be used through the heating season, and then it will be modulated somewhat. But by how much? Where can I get that information?
It's a really difficult question, but I would also be cautious about putting underfloor heating into a church unless you're using it a lot.
Yeah,
which we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're using it a lot, then it will use full power to get to warm up as it's warming up, and it will use full power on when it's very cold, when it's below zero outside. All the rest of the time, it will modulate. 130 watts
the
per
big
meter
question
squared
is how much.
Yeah, I think
at
this
the
is
moment
where
we've got 85 kilowatts of infrared heating.
Yeah,
which we're very sparing with when we switch it on.
It varies quite linearly how much you need, apart from excessive wind. But you can kind of look at maximum at -2 degrees or -3, depending on where you are in Sussex.
Yeah,
and then you're kind of switching it off at 16, and how much you need is pretty linear in between that.
Yeah,
That's very interesting, Simon. Thank you.
I think we're going to have to draw things to a close. I think just on that again, I agree with what Simon's saying, and I think this is it's this element of caution in having people who are sort of specialists in just one technology and this is how the energy audits really sort of stand back and look at the big picture, including things like insulation, draft proofing, usage patterns, and then that gives you the guidance in terms of, okay, this is the sort of technology that's right for our circumstances as we're using the church at the moment. And then you sort of, and then it gives you that confidence that you're engaging with the right sector expert. Yeah. Good. Thank you so much to everybody for participating, particularly Paul and Gareth and Simon. Really good to have you along as well. I've just put into the chat the link for the Portsmouth, it's actually Joint Diocesan Net Zero Conference. You can also find that on the Portsmouth and the Chichester website. Please do book off. It's going to be a really, really sort of stimulating day. Again, if you want to join the CoP and be involved in the sort of conversation flow going around through the emails, if you can complete the form, the sign-up form that Gareth has already shared. Yeah, anybody who hasn't had an audit yet, give us a shout, and we can keep you in mind for whatever is the best deal going on at the moment, including the potential free ones. And Gareth, I think we'll plan another session like this in the new year. Again, ideally, interviewing somebody else who's can share their real life practical experiences. And I think that's probably it. I don't know, Gareth, have I missed anything?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered everything. As you said, we'll have another meeting in the new year.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I'll get the recording converted to YouTube as soon as possible, Phil, so you'll be able to see what you've missed, and we'll get it out to people who weren't able to attend at all. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Great. Mm-hmm. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Recording. Stop recording. How do I stop recording? There we go.